Yo, welcome back to the Winner's Paradigm podcast. Today's another amazing episode. It's just going to be me. And why? Because I've been going through a lot in life lately. And one of the things that happened for me was talking to a client the other day. He was talking about he has no additive value. He had nothing that he can be able to add to another man to be able to help them and so forth. So it was powerful for me because it allowed me to see how I can help him, how I can show up differently, and how I can be better as a leader, and this is what it is. So we're going to start breaking down these little segments into life. I literally did a live video yesterday in my Facebook group talking about using the current things as applications for your life and showing up as that best version of yourself and how you need to be. So in this case, we're going to be talking about using that vulnerability and then connecting with the audience on a deeper level. How do you do that? Well, you got to be able to put them in your shoes. You got to be able to talk about these things. And the one thing that I've done well throughout podcasting is getting on and talking about all the adversity I faced in my life and how it made me change and how I needed to show up differently with coming um, to life. And that's really the power, is figuring out for yourself, how are you going to show up? How are you going to be better? How are you going to be able to execute when the day happens? And a lot of times that's not what happens to us. A lot of times we don't go through all these things. We don't do these things. We don't show up as the best we can be. And it shows, so that's why I talk about, for instance, the beginning of the podcast was aligning yourself to your definition of success. It still is that way, but now I talk to that man who got on his knees praying God for things to change. It's going to mean that he does things a little bit different. It's going to mean that he, is going to look at things at face value, and it's going to be able to see, hey, this is how I need to show up. This is the man that I admire. This is how I need to be. When I'm connecting with people on a vulnerable level, you can laugh. And that's something I've been doing lately, is laughing on people when they're giving me excuses or telling me how hard shit is, because I know exactly how it is. So I start laughing because I'm like, bro, I've been there, done that. And I know exactly how it feels to really be going through the motions and so forth. So if you feel like that's you, open up, figure out what you can be able to connect with your audience about. Everybody's been through something, and that's the power. And when I was talking to that conversation with that client, for instance, and he was talking about he had no value, and man, I met this man in March 2022, November 23. This man's a completely different man. He put the work into himself. The pain was so fucking bad that he lost everything, so he had to become a better man, and that is the fucking key. Is if you can be that vulnerable and you can talk on that level of what it means to look yourself in the face every day, what it means to not be that man. For me, it was the getting high every day, going to a job that I didn't give a fuck about, or even thinking that I was at the right job and them treating me like dog shit. It is everything, because another man will understand that. Another man will understand what it means to be at a job and paying bills and fucking trying to do all these things. But really feeling out of alignment and so forth. So when you're talking to your audience, when you're trying to give a story and talk about being vulnerable and connecting with them on a deeper level, you need to be thinking and be cognizant of all the things that you went through up until this point, to where you were like, fuck, man, I don't know if I can be able to do this. And that's where the challenges come in, the fears, the limiting beliefs, the understanding that sometimes you got to put in more work. And like for me, I take care of the kids during the day and I'm doing shit for the business, and it's been slow, and I can make all the fucking excuses in the world. But the difference is there's a final fucking product of being done, and there's a final product of not being done. And in my case, it's making sure that the things do get done and how I'm going to be able to show up better within that time frame. So for your case, highlight the positive things, show the growth, show the acceptance, and that's exactly what it is. For me, it was getting on my knees. It was praying to God. It was saying, God, I need help. God, I need to be better. God, I need to show up in a different light. And that was how I was able to do it, was being able to open up and show people the real me. And that was one thing I always ran from my whole entire life, is fully being me, because I couldn't within circumstance of where I was in and so forth. But everybody's house, I was always giving little tidbits, always saying a little bit of things, always trying to be the best that I can be, and always trying to get advice and things that I was always searching for. Always look for that solid motherfucker. I wanted that dad that checked all the boxes. So now when I'm talking about being vulnerable, when I'm talking about showing up, it's that man that I admire. It's the man that I'm like, man, I've always missed this fucking guy. Was you go to him for advice, he shows up. This man's in the gym, he eats clean, he doesn't drink, He doesn't feed into his vices. He's going to understand and help you through whatever situation you're going through. Like, this is all the things that I embody. And that's why I talk about being vulnerable and connecting on that deeper level. Is when we can have those conversations, when we can do those things, people are going to understand us. People are going to see us differently. And it takes time. One of the things that I'm just going to close up with here is when you're doing these things, people aren't going to see you as that. My wife's seen me as the old previous version, and maybe still sometimes does because of my ego and the way I say shit and so forth. But for me, it's continually going back to that drawing board and saying, hey, you got on your knees, you prayed to God that things needed to change. You needed to be better. So fucking be better. There is no tomorrow. There is no, oh, I can do this. That no, you know what I mean? There's motherfucking today, and how you show up today. And how you show up today is going to judge how tomorrow ends up. And if you can be able to talk about your story, you can be able to be vulnerable. And this is something that I talk about on my 9-step program, the podcasting, or excuse me, Pod Prosper blueprint. Is when we're talking about Pod Prosper, we're looking at all these foundational principles. I'm talking about your compelling content. I'm talking about the foundation of your podcast. I'm talking about monetizing your podcast. How are we going to do this, and how are we going to be able to use it? And for me, the leverage has been talking to the man who got on his knees, and then getting the elite entrepreneurs in and saying, hey man, how do you show up in your life every single day? How are you the best dad you can be? How are you the best husband? How did you fail, and how did you rebound from those failures? And that's the key, is when you can open up that vulnerable side and you can be able to use that, it makes it better. I was literally having a conversation with my wife the other day, and she was like, one thing you're really good at is asking people questions and really leaning into that. And that was something I used to struggle with, still sometimes struggle with certain people, or certain people I can feel myself not wanting to have that conversation based off of their mindset and where they're currently at. Is I'm like, I don't want to fucking spend a time of day talking to this dude. So it's me being vulnerable within that time frame and being like, hey man, I noticed this, connecting on that one thing and using that as the leveraging tool to help them within that time frame. It's not my job to judge, to fucking say whatever. It's my job to be the guide. It's my job to help you on your journey. And the way that I do that is talking about the shit that I went through in my own path. So when you're vulnerable, when you show things that actually happen to you, and you're using that real life application to help somebody within their own life, within their own time frame, it means that you have the awareness, you have the conscience, you understand what is right, you understand what is wrong, you understand the pain of what that person's going through. And again, the more vulnerable we are, the more that we open up, the more that we talk about it. Even the client who said he had no value to fucking add, he had tons of value. Why? Because he's that man who went through the fucking suck and had to figure it out. And that was something for me that I loved within that time frame, and I really took that conversation to heart, because I was like, bro, I know exactly what it means to call one of your mentors and be fucking bawling your eyes out. And man, I don't know what to do. And normally you know what to do. And he's like, hey, everything's within you. And I'm kind of like, man, fuck off. You know what you're talking about. Everything's within you. And when I really did some meditation, I started working out more, losing the weight, and going back into it, it was everything is within me. Yes, these were some insecurities within my own self that I need to figure out. There was some shit going on within my own self that I wasn't aware of. So it allowed me to have that awareness. It allowed me to be able to go back to the drawing board and show up as a better version and bring that best out of me, because I was able to be vulnerable and open up to my audience and show them, hey, this is who Alundis is. And that's why when I talk about that man who got his knees praying to God, I fucking live that shit every day, because that's something I got to do. I got to look myself in the mirror. I got to see these tough things. I got to be able to share it. A lot of times as men, we don't do that. We're trained not to. We're trained to suck it the fuck up. We're trained to be macho, and we don't connect on that part. So when you're going on a podcast, when you're talking to your audience on a deeper level, open up those things. Talk about the things that changed your life and how you live differently because of that pain that focuses it. And the more that you focus on that, the more you focus on the value that you can bring, the more you can give, the more rewarding it's going to be, the more that comes back to your brand, the more that you build yourself up. And that is something I've been doing. That is something I'm going to continually do. And that is something that I wanted to share today, because I feel like that is the most important, is giving people the authenticity and the vulnerability of you, so they know exactly who you are, how you show up, and what you do. Peace.